I found out about self-storage purely because I ran an accounting practice at that point in time, and I was looking for a business which really didn't require personal exertion type income. It was something that would run 7 days a week, earn income, but you didn't necessarily have to be there. And I was speaking to my father-in-law about that, and he ran a business of motels. He's one of the first in South Australia to open up the motel industry. And he had some friends in America, and they mentioned self-storage and what it was about. And I went basically from there. I was travelling to the States at the time and had a look at facilities there, and then started to open up in South Australia. Our first facility was in a place called Hampton Road, which is only about 1k out of the centre of Adelaide, the city. We didn't know, well, I didn't know where the market for self-storage was. You know, did it come from real estate agents? Did it come from travel? Where the market was, no one really defined who really required storage. And it was a new concept. So I built all these units, and I had quite a few inquiries, and I used to meet people down there, whether it be 7 o'clock in the morning or late at night, and show them facility, but they were all interested, but no one actually booked a unit. And I thought I must be missing something here. Why is this the case that people aren't committing into a storage facility when they can actually see what it's all about? So I went up to the equivalent of a Bunnings in those days, a Lloyd Hardware, and I bought a whole heap of different padlocks. And we had various sizes. We had an A size, a B size, a C and a D. So I locked every A, every B, every C, every D unit except one of each size. And when people came down and wanted, say, for example, an A unit, I said, well, quite frankly, I've only got this one left. And as soon as they felt that other people were storing there, it gave them a comfort zone. It's a bit like the first sheep that moved through the gate. If you get the first few through, everyone followed, and from there, it just took off. I think that's probably the most confronting thing that we've got facing us, is that transition from one generation to another. And I think it's also mixed with the transition in Australia generally, where the transfer of wealth in Australia in the next 20 years from one generation to another is massive. I think that the biggest problem is trying to get that generational change, and that is a challenge I think a lot of families that have run self-storage face today, and there's no simple answer to that. You can do a certain amount of protection, and you can do a certain amount of encouragement within family, but it is a challenge to make sure it goes from generation to generation. And we're currently working on that and have been for the last couple of years. I had Jim Miller ring me, and I'm not too sure why Jim rang me, but he knew that I'd started in Adelaide, and it's interesting, we have very similar backgrounds. We worked in stock agents in the cattle market, and I was in the same scenario as Jim was at his young age. So he came down to see me and looked at what we were doing and said, look, we really believe this industry has got some legs, but we also believe we should regulate ourselves rather than the government come in and regulate. And he was very strong on that. At the time, I didn't really go along with what he wanted to do because the industry is very young, and I think there was a protection in everyone's mind, certainly in my mind, that you didn't want to speak to your opposition even if they were interstate. You had your cards very close to your chest. But over a passage of time, Jim convinced me that that's the way to go, and that's how I ended up getting onto the board, that he asked me to be part of the board. And I obviously through that met people like yourself and Phil Robbie and a whole lot of people. But initially, if you look at the biggest challenge, frankly, was finance. No one understood the complex, and I know that when I approached one of the major four banks with finance, in those days we didn't have privacy policies, and so the regional manager showed me what the state manager thought of my idea with self-storage to fund. And on the front of my file was, this business is nothing short of sheer folly. I wish he was alive today to see the sheer folly industry be as big as it is. I've had a fantastic friendship, not only with Dallas Dogger, who I think was probably one of my closest associations that I had in the early days of the industry. I think because we've had an accounting type background, we kind of understood figures a little bit more. And whilst we weren't in opposition, we had very open discussions about where the industry was going and what we were doing. From that, developed being on the board, and I met other people like Richard Whalen, the Wilsons, the Phil Robbies, and we had a very tight group at the end where we used to openly discuss figures, facts, information that we would be very sensitive in not sharing with others, but we formed that group, and from that group, even though some have sold out or changed, that friendship has gone beyond just the self-storage. I think there's going to be an enormous change in the next 30 years. I think we've already started the digital age, and I think that is a real, I won't say a threat, I think it's probably a threat for my generation, because that digital experience is nowhere near as great as it is for the millenniums that are coming through, and they want basically no contact. They want the product now, they want it today, they don't want a lot of fuss. So the way in which self-storage is going to be handled, I think, will be very different. I think also the market will be different to the extent that the next generation coming through are basically not storers of traditional use for antique furniture or family objects or whatever. The younger generation are the flat pack generation, where they don't hold those things in high value. They buy them, they use them, they either put them on Gumtree or they dump them. But what they will need, because of the high-rise type of density living, they'll require smaller units, and it might be for the golf clubs, it might be for the jet ski, it might be for those lifestyle things that they want to store, which is going to be a challenge for the storage industry in terms of the location of those facilities in those high-rise areas. We didn't know this at the time, but I was approached by the Federal Police to say that they knew of this particular customer storing with us, and he was part of an international gun smuggling ring that came from the United States, basically not through Sydney or Melbourne, but through Adelaide to South Africa, eventually to Ireland. And they overlaid their security system over our existing system, and we were sworn to secrecy that we would not make mention to even our team members of what was actually going on with the Federal Police. So one morning I got a call about 2:30 in the morning. Yes, the Federal Police alarm had gone off, and can I attend? So I flashed out there like a rocket, only to be told to get back into my car because they had let these German Shepherds or Alsatian dogs that were ferocious up a plank and over the fence, and every other policeman that wasn't the handler was locked into the car with their windows up. These dogs went over the fence. Swear to God, if I was on the other side, I would clear the Olympic high jump record if one of those dogs was behind me. Cut a long story short, what turned out to be stored in our facility, which was at Jepps Cross, were AK-47s that were brand new AK-47s provided by the US Army, and they were untouched. And we had, I'm not too sure the number, but it was a substantial number of AK-47s together with the ammunition. And anyhow, that group was broken. And that was probably an interesting story for me to know that even our storage had some worldwide appeal.
But otherwise we generally don't know what's in units.
That's very true, we don't. We try to make every endeavour to make sure. We used to have as a story the very close relationship with the drug squad and major crime in Adelaide. And their dogs were trained for sniffer dogs, and they used to go through our facilities with regard to marijuana and those type of drugs. Unfortunately now with the privacy laws, that doesn't happen.